Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video, interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist / secular / awesome community while there still is a community. This is episode number 134. I'm recording live on it's March 7th, 2018. Happy March, first podcast of the month. Thanks again to Patrick Horst, the man of non-mystery behind Nashville Nones, for being on last week. If you didn't like me talking to him, well, you can listen to him on Beyond the Trailer Park. That was recorded about 36 hours after our talk. I really need a no non-compete clause when I have my guests on, but that's the way it goes. When people are awesome, the awesome gets spread. So I had Trav on for episode 52, which is March 31st, 2016. Wow, not much has happened since then. In the meantime, they have gone by Podcastical. Trav is the co-host of the Biskeptical podcast with Morgan Stringer and is the sole proprietor of the slightly ahead of me on the episode timeline By All Means podcast.
By any means.
By any means. Did I say it wrong? Man, I tell you.
By all means.
Some means. By any means. Listen to me. Listen to that person. Trav will be speaking at NanoCon on activist burnout. I'm having just about everything burnout, so perhaps Trav will be able to help. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me back on. It's great to talk to you.
It is definitely good to talk to you. I watched the episode from 2 years ago, and the weirdest thing from that was that I made a mention of God's Not Dead 2 coming out. And I was thinking to myself, does it really take 2 years to make one of those? I mean, the script takes 45 seconds.
It's a Mad Libs thing, you know?
True. So I don't have great out-of-context quotes. So a non-out-of-context quote from you is, am I a fraud? And my answer is, you're not. So that's an easy part of the evening. So I don't know. How do we quickly catch up on the past 2 years? How is podcast life, and what made you think one podcast just doesn't cut it?
Okay, so the Biskeptical podcast came around. I think it was actually shortly after our initial discussion. I don't know how I came up with it, but one day, bisexuals love bisexual puns, and one day I just thought of, Biskeptical, and I thought, oh, that is such an awesome name. And I thought about maybe changing the name from By Any Means to Biskeptical, but I was like, nah, By Any Means has become my sort of, trademark brand name. And so I think also around the same time, folks from the No Religion Required podcast were starting to split off and do side projects. I think around that time. Yeah, it was around that time. Bobby started doing Hope After Faith with Jerry. Let's see here. I think, Miss Ashley was doing... I forgot what it was. It was
with
the
Trailer Park. She was on that.
No. It was before Beyond the Trailer Park. This is the one she did with Corinne and Heretic Woman. I forgot.
The First Ladies.
Yeah, something like that. The one where
it was sitcoms. It was on for 2 episodes and got canceled because it didn't last very long. Sadly, I had him on my show, of course, but
right? Yeah.
I don't kill everybody.
Well,
kill everybody's show. Let's just say that.
Okay. Well, I hope I'll definitely keep that in mind. Anyways, and then I think Jeremiah and Ari started doing the SJW Circle Jerk. And so I thought, oh, maybe I can get a side project show. And so I posted on Facebook and said, oh, I have this great idea for a new podcast. It's called Biskeptical. I don't know what it's going to be, though. Would any of my fellow bisexual atheists like to get involved? And Morgan Stringer said, yeah, sure, sounds great. And so I messaged her and I was like, you know what I'm thinking? Maybe some sort of, commentary show where we talk about, subjects, news stories and controversial subjects, try to get to the bottom of it. She's like, yeah, that's great. And so that's how the Biskeptical podcast got started. It's been basically every other week because I didn't want to burden her with a lot of stuff, like, didn't want her to, burn the candle at both ends. And so it's like, oh, let's just do every other week. Well, unfortunately, ever since Trump got in office, it seems like there's been a new, crazy news story every week. And so I'm starting to think maybe we should redo the whole every other episode thing. Or maybe what we'll do is we'll just, like, I don't know, do like some sort of 24-hour what you call it, podcast where we just watch CNN and just like scream at the TV.
There's an idea, we need another 24-hour show. Just like you could do it for charity, huh? There's an idea.
Well, Morgan said that no, she'd probably end up binge drinking and chain smoking if we ever did that. So, but yeah, we've been doing that for quite a while. As far as other stuff happening with me, well, there's a lot happening in 2 years. I'm probably gonna forget a whole bunch, but that's definitely the story with the Biskeptical podcast.
Well, what's happening with the writing career? I hear you're trying to make a living doing two things that usually don't lead to that, podcasting and writing.
Yeah. What happened was, early last year, I lost my job due to scheduling conflicts, and so I thought, you know what? I kind of don't really want to sit in an office all day. It's not really me. I've always, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be some sort of content creator, although I didn't know at the time whether it'd be, artist or poet or musician. So I eventually ended up, realizing I can write pretty good articles talking about, controversial subjects and news stories in sort of nuanced ways and give my own unique spin on it. So I thought, oh, I'll try doing that. I was for a while, starting last year, writing an article a week for Paste magazine, which they usually do like music and stuff, but at the time they also had a science section, and the assistant editor of that posted sort of a job opening in a Facebook group for writing jobs, and so I applied and got that job. That unfortunately lasted until I think August because the science section folded. Plus, it was a hassle getting paid too. But that's another story. And right now, though, try to do at least one article a week for a website called Splice Today, which was founded by Russ Smith, who did a couple of alternative daily newspapers. I think it was one based in Baltimore, the other based in DC, and also one in New York. I forgot their exact names. But unfortunately, it only pays like $35 an article, and so definitely trying to find more writing gigs. I also see here frequently write for ravishly.com, which is sort of like a feminist website, and had a couple of gigs here and there writing for like The Establishment, and let's see here. Oh, I also wrote for an op-ed for Huffington Post a couple weeks ago too.
Have you ever considered, maybe just for research purposes, just like doing a 180 flip and going anti everything you're pro and seeing how the business goes that way?
You know what? I actually thought about, creating this fake YouTube channel where I play a total shitlord and see how much Patreon money I can get from that, but I don't know. I feel dirty just thinking about it.
Well, you have to come up with like the most ridiculous name you could think of, and then just like, have someone get you an avatar and you'd be set.
Well, yeah,
Avatars are popular these days.
Well, yeah, that's certainly true. It doesn't really require much. I think I might also have to get a British accent as well.
Oh, that's right. If you have a British accent, people like add like 20 IQ points. That's the only way it explains Milo or Carl, and I'm only calling him Carl because I just can't deal with
Right.
the nom de YouTube. Okay, so to be timely, today, of course, is the day that we got the response. Lawrence Krauss was, of course, accused of lots of improprieties on a
Mm-hmm.
BuzzFeed article that I think came out last week.
Mm-hmm.
And his response was posted via, of course, like a PDF
Mm-hmm.
today. I don't know if I don't even know if you necessarily need to read it, but how do you feel now? Do you feel any different about the whole situation?
Nope. I don't. I should say I only briefly skimmed it because I've been busy doing other stuff today, and also I really don't feel like giving him either the time or the day because a couple of my friends in the atheist community kind of already sort of whispered stuff about him to me, so it wasn't really a shock when the article came out. I mean, it was shocking. The details were shocking because I didn't know the details before then. I thought, prior to the article coming out, that he was, I don't know, just behaved like some sort of, I don't know, mm, drunken asshole at a bar going, "Hey, baby, yeah," and all that, and all that stuff. I didn't know it was like the real depths of it. I didn't really, like I said, I didn't read too much of the apology. I just read like the top where he said, the BuzzFeed article has a whole bunch of false accusations against me, and then he went through whole details and saying, this is what really happened here, and this is what really happened there, and then at the end, he apologizes, I'm sorry that my actions, made people uncomfortable and all that stuff, but I don't really feel the need to comb through the entire thing to sort of weed out the stuff that doesn't make sense or not. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Well, when it comes to accusations like this, why do some people? Of course, this isn't how you feel, so you're out there having to project. But why do people all of a sudden put this like this is a court of law type deal where we need a certain level of evidence that actually seems higher than the kind of evidence someone would need to be arrested for anything, which isn't even being accused in this case, I guess.
I don't know. I think probably what happens is a lot of people weaponize their skepticism, In fact, I was just talking to Stephanie Savan for this week's episode of By Any Means, which will come out tomorrow morning. And we not only did I have her on to talk about the upcoming Secular Women Work Conference she's helping put together, but also about I definitely hope to go there. But also to talk about Lawrence Krauss and sexual misconduct in the atheist movement. And I just proposed a hypothesis to her, and I said, how like the church often uses God's grace to cover up not just sexual misconduct, but misconduct in general and stuff, maybe the atheist movement weaponizes skepticism the same way, I mean, yes, we should be evidence-based, but from what Morgan told me, because we've talked a lot about Me Too and sexual misconduct and on the Biskeptical podcast, number one, telling people about being assaulted is often very triggering and traumatizing, because you're basically sort of reliving the whole thing, and especially if you're going through every single detail of it, I can only imagine. And also, yes, false accusations do happen, but they're very rare. And I think that's because, well, I mean, like I said, if you go through like the whole process of like rehashing all the details about what happened, I don't know, at least I would eventually crack, and and admit that the whole thing was made up. I mean, I'm not a sexual assault survivor, so I can't say anything either way. But yeah, given the facts that rape accusations are very rare, and that it is such a horrendous ordeal, reporting a rape to either authorities or even, well, when I say authorities, I don't mean just the police, but also like anyone who's in charge of, I don't know, a campus or a conference even. I tend to side more with the people, the survivor, that although even though I might not, I don't know, it's like I definitely I automatically believe the survivor, but I also kind of like, if I don't know the whole story, I'll just sort of keep an eye on somebody, which kind of happened with one particular person we know, which I won't get into here. Does any of that make sense? I'm sort of rambling at this point.
Rambling is good. That's the whole point of the show. But rambling while making good points. Yeah, I was thinking, first of all, Lawrence Krauss had to take like 10 pages to cover every accusation. I don't even know if every accusation was covered. And you mentioned like an apology. I'm like, I didn't get to the part where the apology happened.
The last paragraph.
This was like felt like a politician. Like, I'm sorry you feel bad. Like, I don't know. I was trying to compare it to, well, I was in a medically induced coma and I had these hallucinations. And I could tell people about the hallucinations, and then they would say, I don't believe you because I wasn't there. And it's like, well, it actually wasn't possible for you to be there because you're in my head. That doesn't quite work out. But I mean, not just that, but like judging me negatively because I had hallucinations. Like that kind of, and just that negativity that comes upon anybody who comes out at all. People, I still don't know why people would say, I don't know why people don't say something right away. It's like, well, in some cases people did. And there was that weird situation where he was in Australia where he like, the allegation was he grabbed the breast, and then there was a picture taken, but he wasn't touching them. But like 3 witnesses said they saw it. And so it's like, well, that's definitely a he said, she said kind of situation. But to have to explain like 20 different scenarios definitely makes you go, boy, that's a lot of, having to backtrack.
Yeah, I hardly remember what I did last week.
Exactly. I mean, I can relate. I didn't remember what I did before the show started. Well, let's get back to you. I mean, this is all about you. So you're going to be doing a talk at Nashville Nones coming up next weekend on the 17th in Nashville, sunny Nashville. So when did you decide you wanted to do? What was the process like to get to be one of the speakers? And of course, talk about how do we combat burnout?
Well, I've always wanted to. Oh, I have to admit, one reason why I want to get into more public speaking, do more public speaking at atheist cons, and is because so I can get in for free. But also, I do have a passion for educating people about things, especially social justice issues. So I think I forgot, it was like late last year. I just messaged the organizers at Nashville Nones and said, hey, are you accepting applications for are you accepting talk pitches? And he said, well, we definitely accept pitches for workshops. So here's the workshop pitch application. And so I think at first I was going to talk about how to change people's minds, but then I was like, no, I don't really quite know how to do that. And so I thought, oh, activist burnout. And so I just wrote the proposal and sent it to them. They said, And on the proposal, it said that they should get back to me around end of January. Fast forward to, a couple months ago, end of January, I messaged him and said, "So, what do you think?" And he was like, "Hey, sorry for getting to you late, but yeah, sure, yeah, sure. We'd love to have you speak there." And so that's how I ended up, speaking at Nashville Nones. As far as the crux of the workshop, it's going to start off with me giving like my story, which should run about 15 to 20 minutes. I think I have like 45 minutes per thing. And so I'm going to go into a little bit of my story of how, when I started podcasting and blogging, everything was great, but, between problems within the community, me feeling like I have to solve all the problems, and also
As you should.
Yeah.
You could solve it all. That'd be like, all right. If you can do it in 45 minutes, all right. All problems solved.
Hell yeah.
Need to go to both just to cover. Because
Right.
I don't know because I know the podcast panel, there are two of them. I don't know if you get to repeat. I kind of hope so in a way, because I like the idea that if they have two chances, you get another chance to see, because there's 15, I think, from what I saw.
Right, yeah. So yeah, between let's see here, community drama and trying to save the entire world by myself, and also my own feelings of trying to be perfect, and literally beating myself up when I make a mistake. I basically had to learn the hard way how to take good care of myself. And so I'm going to basically just offer tips like, it's always good to unplug and recharge, because one thing that I really struggle with is sensory overload. I was recently diagnosed with being on the autism spectrum, and social media is not exactly the best place for avoiding sensory overload, because you're literally just staring at a screen, scrolling up and seeing everybody's hot take on everything. And I tend to scroll pretty fast, because when I'm bored, and so like it doesn't really give my brain time to like process everything and really think about what I'm reading. And so yeah, unplug and recharge, that's definitely one. Pick your battles, that's definitely something else I need to work on as well. And let's see here, and there's a couple of others, but I can't think of them right now.
Well, let me test you on something that I definitely do. How many times a day do you like write a tweet and then like erase it, or do you just go ahead and let it fly?
It
Or a
depends.
Facebook post, I guess that's the same thing.
Sometimes I'll write something out and then delete it. Especially if it's like a half-baked idea that sort of pops in my head, I'll write it down, but then halfway through, it's like, this isn't making any sense. Although there are some half-baked ideas I do tweet out and then look back and go, that didn't make sense. What the heck am I talking about? Like I wrote on Twitter, behold, I teach you the Ubermensch that transcends beyond modernism and postmodernism. And I was thinking to myself, Trav, you were getting too obsessed with the philosophy that day, were you? You probably should have just, I don't know, calmed down a little bit before you tweeted that. So yeah, it depends. Sometimes I just say whatever's on my mind, even if it doesn't make sense. And sometimes sometimes I like realize I'm not making any sense and delete everything I was just typing. Or sometimes I delete something that, looking back, made a lot of sense and probably would add a lot to the discourse, but I decided for one reason or another not to post it.
Well, after the events of the past couple weeks, I saw you're pretty open about just like sometimes thinking, Why do I do this? Why do I try to engage? What difference am I making? What eventually gets you off that kind of show activism ledge and get you to say, no, I got to keep doing this?
Well, I actually asked Kelly Wright that a couple of months ago. I forgot what the drama was at the time,
Yeah,
but
I know. What was the drama? Yeah, 2 weeks ago or a week ago or yesterday.
right. Uh, and like I said, I don't remember what we were talking about, but I asked her. I said, you know, what makes you keep doing what you do when you feel like, everyone in your little activist group is a total asshole and toxic? And she said, here's the thing. I don't do it for them. I don't do it for David Smalley or anybody else. I do it for the kids in my inbox. And that's something I really have to keep reminding myself too. I mean, I don't get as many emails as she does, but I've definitely received a lot of personal messages thanking me for something I said on the podcast. And so those are the people that keep me going. You know, the ones that, listen not because, I'm another atheist podcaster and therefore they're obliged to listen to me, but they really like what I have to say and that I change their minds on certain things and also make them feel a little less lonely. That's what keeps me going.
That's true. It doesn't take a lot of feedback to make you, I don't know. You have to say it's a labor. There's a bit of, there has to be some kind of passion behind it because yeah, sometimes you're like, I'm just talking to this computer here and the person
Right.
who's on the other side, and that's about it. All right. Well, let's try this one since we're on social media and Twitter. So this is an actual real tweet that I saw earlier tonight from someone who's been on this show. Me Too has devolved into a useless train wreck. What say you? Or is a face palm enough of a reaction?
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't know the context of it. I know there's been a lot of debate over the article about Aziz Ansari, about, whether that counts. I don't know. I'm not going to say anything either way because I've never been in that situation. I can't say anything either way. However, there's a lot of people saying that, oh, now we're equating, awkward sex with rape and it's gone too far and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And look, no movement is perfect. Okay. It's not even like an organized movement, it's just, regular people coming out feeling emboldened to tell their stories. Okay. So, might there be a few false allegations coming out? Maybe. You never know. I don't know the exact numbers. I do know, like I said earlier, that false accusations are very rare and very small. The number percentage is very small. But I really don't understand this whole, Me Too has gone too far. What exactly do they mean, other than the debate over the Aziz Ansari story? And so, yeah, I don't know. It seems like well, maybe it has something to do with something that a lot of sort of classical liberals and libertarians, people like Christina Hoff Sommers have been saying for a while, like, the 1 in 4 statistic that, people bring up. Uh she I think she wrote an article that said that, no, well, that number refers to a particular survey that listed, sexual assault from everything to rape to groping. And so therefore by equating the two, you're doing a huge disservice and blah, blah, blah. And every time some men's rights activist brings that up online, I'm like, but it's still bad that it's 1 in every 4, right? And then they'll continue to argue semantics until I hit the block button.
What's the ratio that's acceptable to you? 1 in 20,
Right.
And then it is, yeah, I think somebody posted something to the effect of like, thanks for making me have to jump over a certain level of trauma to make it, legit in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Like, it doesn't mean it. Not all of this stuff we don't say like, oh, these people need to go to jail and throw away the key and the death penalty for making a comment. But it's just bringing this stuff out in the open. Like, even the accusations against Lawrence Krauss. I mean, if that stuff had come out a couple of years ago, I don't know, would it have been taken seriously? Would it just have been shot down instantly just because famous white guy? Clearly, there's an aura around. I mean, as people have said, it's like anytime we find somebody like, oh man, I really like that person and they've been caught, it's like, find somebody else or just don't hero worship to the point where it's going to devastate you when you find out that person isn't up to snuff, because nobody's up to snuff all the time. And you have to kind of figure out who you can accept some failings, and some people are like, all right, that's enough. See ya. That's why you said the block button exists or the mute button exists on social media, or just the turn it off button.
Yep. Pretty much. And also, when you said how, you wonder if the BuzzFeed article about Krauss came out a couple of years ago, would there still be, this sort of reaction? Well, you might remember another BuzzFeed article that came out. It was either last year or the year before. I can't remember, but it came out way before Me Too. And it talked about all the allegations against Michael Shermer. Nothing's happened to his career, has it? So maybe you're onto something.
Still, appearing on stage with Sam Harris, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people have had him on their show are kind of like, oh yeah. And it's true, you mentioned like, the Whisper Network, because Lawrence Krauss was like the headline star at ReasonCon last year. And he kind of did his thing and left because he was doing like some science thing in Charlotte the next day. So he wasn't even around very long. But even then, I mean, when you say like Whisper Network, well, Whisper Network doesn't always get to me. But you definitely, stuff came out. I mean, stuff was being said. And it's just good to be vigilant in a way. I mean, I think we all had that new relationship energy with the atheist movement. You get in there, you go, but people like me, this is awesome and great. We all like science fiction and that kind of thing. Well, I still haven't watched Doctor Who, so don't take me out. Don't remove me, please. But then you find out, oh yeah, we're just like every other group.
Exactly.
And yeah, the only way to make it better is to have to point these things out and try to be better. Now, of course, we did just say, hey, we like Me Too, but now let's maybe go the other way just a little bit. Do you think there's a lack of transgender representation in the Me Too movement?
Yes. In fact, that was my article about that I wrote for Huffington Post. It was initially inspired by the confrontation between Rose McGowan and the trans woman at one of their speaking gigs. I made a point in the article, which I don't like the way the copy editors worded it, because it made it sound like, I was like, yeah, there are, allegations against the trans woman that, according to all these snapshots on Twitter date back to 2010. But forget all that for a second. That's how the copy editors worded it. But I worded it as saying, to be fair, there have been accusations against this woman, however, but anyways, that's beside the point. That incident reminded me of a situation where a friend of mine who's non-binary said that their assault story was basically shot down because they didn't identify as either, a man. They didn't identify as, a woman, or at least femme. And so that got me to thinking like, I wonder if this is a real problem. And so I just pitched to HuffPo. They accepted it. And so I started interviewing a few friends, and I sent a call out to others. And yeah, there is definitely, we can definitely do a lot better job at addressing sexual violence against trans people because there was a survey. I think it was like a National Transgender Health or some sort of national LGBT group, where 47% of trans people who filled out the involved in the study reported sexual violence. Reported being sexual violence survivors. 47. That's over. That's almost half. And so, yeah, and even, but we don't really talk. There's not really a lot of discussions about it in like the mainstream media. When I say mainstream media, I'm talking like the big publications, like Washington Post, New York Times, stuff like that. The only time you really hear stories about that is in like LGBT centered news sites, and so even like the Time magazine article on the Silence Breakers, I think it was called. It was the Person of the Year cover story. They only mention violence against trans people and that particular statistic in one sentence, and that was it. So yeah, I think definitely we need to talk more about violence against trans people and the Me Too conversation. And I think a lot of it has to do with the way it's framed. It's always framed as like, centering around cis women. Now, I'm not saying that cisgender women can't share their stories. Far from it. Everybody should share their stories, which is why I'm saying we need to pass the mic to trans people to tell their stories as well. Of course, a couple of trans excluding radical feminists, or TERFs for short, they didn't like the article and thought that I was trying to silence cis women, but it was just a handful of those assholes, so it wasn't really a big deal.
Yeah, I think I was introduced to that term the last time you were on the show. And yeah, another former guest gone bad. I think that's how she is identified, so not good. Not bad. Bad, not good. That's what I meant to say. Now, I haven't done one of these in a couple weeks, and since the whole show's kind of about this, maybe it doesn't fit, but I'm going to do a quick live read just to let people know. Next weekend, we've talked about conferences and how some of them aren't so great. Well, this is one that's great. NanoCon, Nashville, Tennessee, next weekend. I implore you, if you want to go, you should. It's going to be 450 of your new best friends, and it's as inclusive as a conference like this can be. Plus, there's a pizza party. Yeah. I'll be doing 2 podcast panels, and Trav will be speaking, but they better not put us opposite each other, or else there's going to be no one in my room, and that would just break my heart. So please come next weekend if you're anywhere in the Nashville range. So what makes you decide to join the fray and get in like a Twitter battle with like the Helen Pluckroses of the world?
Oh, that. Well, a funny story about Helen Pluckrose. We're kind of sort of friends, and that kind of an interesting story.
I don't really like that's Helen, just someone who pops up on my account and seems to be the one who kind of like says, well, maybe James Damore has a point. But I don't know. You probably know more than I do. I didn't want to interrupt too much, but just a quick intro, I guess.
Yeah, Helen Pluckrose is a classical liberal writer based in London, and she's definitely of like
British accent. First problem.
Right, exactly. And so yeah, she's definitely part of. She's not a shitlord like Carl or any of those YouTubers, but she's kind of more of the sort of the Peter Boghossian, James Lindsay, well, not necessarily Dave Rubin, but that sort of classical liberal subgenre or subculture of the atheist movement, and very much, or as I like to call them, free speech warriors. But the reason why we kind of struck up somewhat of a friendship is because she and James Lindsay wrote an article for Aereo magazine, which is basically, classical liberal magazine about, trans rights and liberalism. And I thought, oh God, 2 cis people telling trans people to, be the respectable trans people, But I read it, and some of it was actually pretty good. There were some parts I disagreed with, and so I decided to write an article for Splice Today, going through this article and saying, well, they're right here, but not this part, not so much, and they and once it was published online, I of course shared it on Twitter and said something like, my latest article is a response to an Aereo magazine article, and I tagged Aereo magazine's Twitter handle in a tweet. And next thing I know, a couple of hours later, Helen sort of replies and says, and shares my article and says, well, this is actually one of the most reasoned critiques of that article we wrote, compared to some of the other stuff we've been getting. And so she was explaining how, and in my response article, I said, well, gee, I don't see what's so bad about, standing up for my rights and wanting to be referred to by, they, them pronouns. And then Ellen responds to me, no, we want you to do that. That's a good thing. We're just saying, don't get petition to get people fired or thrown in prison for, misgendering you. And so she started following me, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll start following her. And we've had private conversations on Twitter about certain things. And I think pretty much the main thing we agree about is LGBT rights when it comes to philosophy and whether or not postmodernism is literally Hitler. That's where we totally disagree. I mean, I don't consider myself a modernist or a postmodernist or anything like that. If I had to subscribe to just one particular philosophical school of thought, it would be humanism, and which is basically more like a life stance and guiding principles rather than some complex theory. And so yeah, but I don't know. As far as I don't try not to. I don't know. I feel like Michael Corleone. As soon as I think I'm out, they pull me back in when it comes to online drama.
Well, I think it's a little heartwarming to hear people who think they're on opposite sides find out that maybe they have some things in common, because I get too much, especially when I was doing prep for the Christiosity interview a couple weeks ago. All the YouTube battles, the attack videos back and forth. There's never here's what I think, here's what I think. Oh, there's a pre-decided talking point, and it never gets anywhere. So at least they go, well, we intersect in a few places, and maybe we actually can work together on something sometime in the future. Although I see Aereo magazine, I always think Oreo magazine, but that's a different concept.
Right.
But who are you looking forward to seeing at NanoCon? People that you're going to see, and then, of course, people that you're maybe going to see speak.
Well, I'm definitely excited for Callie and Celeste's wedding. I think it's great that they scheduled it the day after the conference, and so I don't have to pay extra traveling money. And of course, I'm going to see Marissa, and I think Ari and Jeremiah are going to be there, and of course, Bobby and Ashley. And as far as speakers, will be real great to see Mandisa Thomas again, because the last time I saw her in person, it was actually at Reason Rally 2 years ago, and I haven't seen her since. And Anthony Magnabosco, I know, is going to be there. And even though we're online friends and I've had him on my podcast, we've never met face to face. And those are the main parts, I mean, yeah, Matt Dillahunty's cool, but I'm not totally a total, fan geek or anything like that. Let's see here. Those are basically the main ones. Oh, and also I'll finally get to meet Casper Rigsby, and those are. Oh, there's also this guy. He recently friended me on Facebook. I heard about him. I think he was on an episode of the Gatheist Manifesto. I forgot his name, but He wrote a book called The Cross on My Back, where he talks about um, his coming out story, both as gay and as an atheist. I know he's speaking at NanoCon, and so I'll be like, oh, cool, I get to meet him in person as well.
Yeah, it's going to be good stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
you'll be like the one hungover person on Sunday, so that'll be good.
Right, yeah, since I quit drinking.
Yeah, do you want to talk about that? Because 2 years ago, you're on the
Sure.
show, and we talked openly about beer, but you've been very vocal about your, I guess you can say, struggles with alcohol and your decision to get rid of it. So, when did you decide that enough was enough, and what was it like finding an alternative to AA? Was it AAA? No, that's the car thing.
Prior to, like, I don't know, it seems like my drinking habit, it's kind of started off as sort of, occasional drink, and then it was like, a beer a night or a glass of wine a night. And then it started getting to 2 beers or 2 glasses of wine a night. And then it wasn't until I think the last presidential election might have had something to do with it, because then I discovered bourbon, and I discovered that, I don't know, it seemed like, hard liquor was the medication I always wanted, like I still take, my regular psychiatric medications, but, in therapy and all that stuff. But, alcohol was just quicker, I didn't have to go through any of the cognitive behavioral therapy skills they taught me. I could just, get wasted, and that would be so much easier. And so I spent most of 2017 drunk. What I would do is I would pretty much drink about, I'd say about this much bourbon a night. And so yeah, I'd be like, when I go to bed, I'd be like stumbling over my feet to bed. And the when what made me decide to change was, let's see here, I think it was around early November or late December of a couple months ago, when I interviewed Madison Kimry, who I met at PastaCon. She's a 13-year-old, or maybe 16. Yeah, she's a teenage activist. She's doing great things. I've been wanting to have her on the show ever since I met her at PastaCon. So we finally got a chance to talk. Our conversation was originally scheduled at 8, and I do my interviews via Zencaster because it records each person on a separate track. And so if one person's volume is lower than the other, you can just up the volume on one track, or downgrade or turn down the volume on another track. And it's also recorded straight from your computer too. And so it sounds like, if the other person has a good microphone, it sounds like two people sitting at a table talking to each other. But unfortunately, when it was time to record, she was having trouble logging on. And so I thought, okay, let me try, go to my computer and set it up so I can record Skype conversations, on Audacity. And apparently at the time, I was starting to get drunk, but although I didn't realize it at the time, like the way the words were coming out of my mouth were very much like they are right now, And so I recorded the interview. It was a great conversation. And then when it was time to edit it, I listened to it and I heard this. All right, welcome to the show, Madison. Thanks for joining me today. Oh my God. And I thought, okay, well, maybe later on in the interview it gets a little bit better, but nope. I just slurred the whole way through. And there was like this one point where she made a I forgot what she said exactly. It was some point she made about political apathy among her friends, and went on this. I thought I was just sharing my personal views about how it seems really. It sounds really. It does. I understand political apathy, or not necessarily apathy, but just feeling helpless and not doing anything about it, because you do feel helpless sometimes. Yada, yada, yada. But the way it came out, it sounded like me just drunkenly babbling to her. And so, like, I was totally freaking out. And that's pretty much when I decided, you know what, I should probably do something about this. Um, I first heard about Smart Recovery. I'm not quite sure. It might have been the Thinking Atheist podcast, because I think they did an episode on AA and secular substitutes for that. So I went on the Smart Recovery website and I looked for there are any local meetings, and I found out there was one listed in my hometown, but didn't give any information, and so but a contact person, and so I emailed the person, talked to him on the phone, got all the details, and so yeah, since early December, I've been going weekly with a few exceptions here and there due to weather, illness, being out of town one week, all that stuff. Just, attending the meeting. And Smart Recovery, it's science and reason based. And a lot of the skills they teach you is basically cognitive behavioral therapy. Like just tonight, I was saying that earlier this week, I was triggered and thinking about drinking because, I was basically get involved with internet drama and trying to, come up with the perfect argument for why postmodernism, despite its flaws, isn't like, the big bad, the boogeyman everyone says it is, and getting major sensory overload and thought overload. And so like Monday this past week, I felt like really depressed and kind of anxious and, wanting a drink. And I remember just thinking to myself, oh, I just so want to die. And then I just stopped myself and I was like, do you though? And so I started going through the sort of process of sort of, okay, let's take apart this thought one little by bit. And so basically sort of just reasoned, like got to the point where getting to the bottom of why I was feeling the way I was feeling and why I felt the need for a drink. And so, yeah, it's definitely helped me out. Now, I will say this. I did lapse one day a couple of months ago, but since then it's been, smooth sailing, and I'm starting to get really more serious about confronting the things that make me want to drink, not just social drink, but just get absolutely fucked up drunk.
That's a good insight there. That's good to hear that you're doing better.
Yeah, I'm really proud of myself.
So that was a bit of a darker subject, so I figure we could finish off with something a little bit lighter. Now, last time you were on,
Sure.
we were talking about like kind of fantasy sci-fi shows, and we're talking about like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Doctor Who. Now, I believe you've watched the show Altered Carbon, which is on Netflix. Is that something you'd want to talk about that at all, or are there other shows that you've watched recently that maybe were a little higher on the bar for you?
Well, to be honest, I think I only saw like 3 or 4 episodes of Altered Carbon because I tried to get into the show, but I kept watching it going, I've seen this all before. Everything that's going on in this show, I've seen in other shows and movies. A futuristic society that's mixed with Japanese culture, Blade Runner. The whole idea of transferring consciousness into a machine, the shitty Johnny Depp movie, and Black Mirror.
Right.
A female cop that's of color, Luke Cage and the Punisher. And so, yeah, just the whole thing just didn't really seem very original to me, you know. Although we did get to see, oh, I forgot the British guy's name, James Purefoy, I think the actor's name.
Right.
We did get to see him in all his naked glory in episode 2, and I can tell he's definitely not Jewish. um,
There's a
now
lot of
it's
naked on that show. It's I'm wondering because the books that they're based on, the first book came out in 2002. Made me think there's a show called The Alienist that's out
Mhm.
now, and the book was like 20 years old, and it was like them solving crimes like in the 19th century. But because so many of those shows have come out since, it doesn't
Mhm.
seem original, and it is like, okay, let's go for the the person solving crimes kind of thing, and of course because people, yeah, it's set what is it, 500 years in the future? I don't know.
Mhm.
Okay, so you've been more of a Black Mirror. Did you see Orville?
No, I haven't. That's like the Star Trek ripoff, isn't it?
Yeah, the Seth MacFarlane. Well, it definitely goes away from being such a Seth MacFarlane show like after the first episode.
Oh,
But that
okay,
was the one
gotcha.
Callie was talking about because I remember watching first half of first episode and going, these got these like dumb jokes and
Mm-hmm.
what's the point? And I haven't really watched Star Trek much, so I can't say I can I don't know. I don't have much of a view, but there was that Black Mirror episode that was like a Star Trek
Yeah,
episode. I can't
yeah,
remember what
that
that
was
one was
good.
called. That was a good episode. But Black Mirror can be such a downer sometimes that it's like,
Right.
I don't know if I want to watch something that I know is going to make me depressed or make me scared about my phone's going to kill me in my sleep.
I like Black Mirror. I haven't watched it in a while, but I like how voidy it is, you know, and the sort of I don't know, weird things it brings up. I did see that apparently the first episode she watched of Black Mirror was the San Junipero episode with the lesbian couple, and I'm telling her, no, don't start with that one. You have to start with the very first episode, the pig fucker episode, you
Oh,
know.
yeah, that's right. The British. I think the whole story is the British Prime Minister. I forget who was kidnapped.
I think like it was either the Princess of England.
It was somebody in like a royal family, and
Right,
the
yeah.
prime minister, in order to get the person back, had to, on camera, have sex with a pig. Yes, that was for.
Right.
That's the. You can say a pilot episode of a show. They got to really get your attention, and that certainly did.
Yep, definitely. You know what show that I've been watching lately that I really like? It's not sci-fi or anything like that. 7 Seconds. Have you seen that one yet?
Um, I've heard that one. That's the problem with Netflix now is there's like 5 new shows every day.
Right,
But
yeah.
that's a murder mystery kind of show. Is that right? I don't
Yeah,
know if
yeah.
is it based on a true story? Or is it just
No, no, it's a
true-ish?
fictional no, it's a
Okay.
fictional story. It was originally based on an old Russian movie that had a similar plot
Hmm.
but very different. 7 Seconds, set in New Jersey, and there's this rookie cop works at narcotics. He's on his way to a hospital. It's a very snowy day, very, icy and stuff. And he's driving through a park trying to get to a hospital because, his wife's pregnant. She had a little bit of spotting, so I must make sure it's okay. But, he was distracted on the phone trying to talk to his wife, and he accidentally runs over a black teenager that was on his bicycle. And so he calls his other buddies in narcotics to, come over and see what I'm gonna do. Of course, the guy who hit him, Petey, he wants to do the right thing, but the other cops, they look and go, you just ran over a black kid. If this leaks out, what that means for us? They're gonna nail us for this. What with Ferguson, Baltimore uprising, and all of that. And so they try to basically cover it up. And so the whole show is like, the the kids, a family, how they grieve, and the Pete, how he's trying to cope with it, and also the cops, it how the cops, they say that they wanted to cover it up so they won't get nailed for being uh racist, but it's pretty soon. Overall, they basically view any black guy on the street as potentially a drug dealer. um and there's also an alcoholic prosecuting attorney who is on the case, and she starts gathering clues too and realize what the cops are doing. So it's a really great show, especially like it's also very relevant too with today's political climate.
True. Okay, well, I'll add that to the list. Now, this is a question from my chat room. They want every week to see what my guests have. So, do you have a joke?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. Let's see here. There was a small town deep in the South where they had two churches, a Baptist church and a Methodist church. Every day they would meet in the park before church service on their bicycles to talk about theology and what what's going on in their churches and whatnot. Well, one Sunday, the Methodist arrives in the park with his bike, but the Baptist preacher arrives on foot. And the Methodist preacher says, what happened to your bike? And the Baptist says, somebody stole it. The Methodist says, you think it was someone in your church? And the Baptist says, yep. And the Methodist says, well, here's what you do. Today, preach about the Ten Commandments and really lay it hard to them. I mean, preach it in a way that they can feel the fire and the brimstone, really convict them in the spirit and go through each commandment, really laying it hard with each commandment you go to, just really hammering it on them until when you finally get to thou shalt not steal, whoever stole your bike will stand up and confess to the crime. The next Sunday, the Baptist preacher arrives at the park with his bicycle. And the Methodist said, oh, I see that my plan worked. And the Baptist preacher says, not exactly. When I got to thou shalt not commit adultery, I remembered where I left my bike.
Nice. It's good to have those reminders, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've reached past the hour point. So tell people where they can track you down with your shows and your writings and all that. And of course, this will be in the show notes as well. Or for those weird people who don't like show notes, help them out.
Sure. Well, they can find both the By Any Means podcast and the Biskeptical podcast. And remember, that's By spelled B-I on, iTunes, Spreaker, and Stitcher. As far as where they can go for my writing, well, I don't really do much blogging mostly because I basically just write for pay nowadays. But when I do have an article out, I usually post a link on my blog at freethoughtblogs.com/byanymeans.
Okay, well, that's very succinct, and people will track you down. And I'm glad that this doesn't happen off. Well, this will be 2 weeks in a row, and maybe next week I'll get some more Nashville Nones people to actually go, hey, we're gonna see each other in person. That's so cool. Finally again. Anyway, so if you want to support this show, be like Bobby, Hugh, Teody, and Jeannie, and go to patreon.com/Zachrilege, ZACHRILEGE. Follow me on Twitter at Zachrilege, like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook, and send all show ideas, hate mail, love mail, whatever you want to zacrilege.cast@gmail.com. Thank you again to Trav for being on tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
We will close with the third Humanist Manifesto that says, we believe in treating everyone with equal worth and dignity, and that includes social media. So good night, everybody. I love all y'all, and talk to you later.